Good morning, everybody. How are you all doing today? I hope you're doing well. Um, my name is Chris Currey, and I'm an assistant professor here at Iowa State University. And today I'm going to be talking about greenhouse photoperiodic lighting strategies because managing photoperiod in our greenhouse is an important factor in crop production. But why do we want to manage photoperiod during production? Well, there are going to be several different reasons why. First, we want to manage photoperiod to promote flowering. Many plants have a flowering response to the day length or to the photoperiod. And by getting our plants into flower, they're going to be more marketable and more appealing to consumers. So here we see a bench that's filled with flats of pansies. And these flowers on the plants help these sell themselves. It's a great thing to market your plant materials. It's a lot easier than having the consumer look at the tag and try and imagine what the plant is going to look like. Rather, they can see exactly what it looks like. Another reason we're going to want to manage flowering is we want to promote it in order to minimize excessive growth. So here we've got some lobelia growing in these containers, and you can see that they're starting to grow into each other and getting large. But you also notice that the plants are still green. These plants aren't marketable yet because they don't have flowers, and they are getting large. That's going to require more growth regulation. It's going to be requiring more water, more fertilizer, and more labor to grow them on until they're ready to sell. But again, you might have to deal with excessive growth that may be unwanted. So one of the other reasons we might want to control photoperiod is to inhibit flowering. So here we have two containers with petunias. Now you'll see the container on the right looks pretty good. That plant is proportional to the container, and you can see it's in flower and it's going to be marketable. Alternatively, that plant on the left side, that is blooming too early. And as that plant continues to bloom, you're going to start to get flowers senescing on the plant, much like you can see on that pot on the right. And we don't want to have to deal with dead flowers. We also want to have energy going into the vegetative growth as we start to bulk that container up and as we start to fill in that container and get it ready to be marketable. And so we can control flowering by managing the day length for many species. In addition to flowering, we do have plants that respond to photoperiod and they start to go dormant. And this is something that we see quite commonly in nature. As the days start to get shorter during the summer and into the fall, plants will start to form buds when we're looking at woody plants or perennial plants. And here we have an example with some dahlias. What we want is to produce a nice flowering dahlia like you see on the left. Alternatively, in this image that was provided to me by Roberto Lopez, you can see that this dahlia is starting to produce tubers and it's starting to go dormant. And that's going to take away some of the energy from that reproductive growth or those flowers. And again, that's what we're trying to market. So when we talk about photoperiod, we're talking about the duration of light during the light hours during the day, the period of light, the photoperiod. But it's actually the duration of the darkness that is the signal. So the most important part when we're talking about day length is going to be that night period. But since we talk about things with respect to day length, I'm going to keep this consistent, and we're going to refer to day length and photoperiod. Now, there are going to be a number of different flowering responses to photoperiod. So I'd like to start this seminar by going over some of the most common flowering responses to photoperiod. The three main photoperiodic response groups are going to be day-neutral plants, short-day plants, and long-day plants. And most plants are going to fit into one of these three categories. Now, there is another photoperiod response group that we're not going to talk about in this presentation, and that's called a dual day length plant. And that might require long days followed by short days or short days followed by long days. But we're going to focus on these three primary groups because, again, most spring annuals, perennials, and potted plants will fall into one of these three categories. So first we have day-neutral plants. And with day-neutral plants, flowering will not occur or be promoted in response to any specific day length. And what I've done is made some graphics here that try to explain this concept. And the yellow bar is going to indicate the day length, and the black bar is going to indicate the night length. So here we have two different scenarios. We've got a short day on the left, and we've got a long day on the right. And when we look at these cartoon responses, you can see both plants are flowering. And again, that means that neither short days nor long days promoted the flowering of these plants. They just grew and flowered under both photoperiods. Now, there may be some other side effects that you might notice when a plant is grown under long day. When the days are long, you might have more photosynthetic light, so you might have more vegetative growth or more bulk on your plants. But that's going to be a separate effect from the effect of day length on the flowering of your plants. So day neutral plants, again, short days or long days, they're going to be able to flower. Now, with short day plants, flowering occurs in response to a short day and long uninterrupted nights. And we'll get more into that uninterrupted night period when we talk about lighting strategies later on in this segment. Now, there's two different types of short day responses. And here we have the first one, and that's the obligate short day response. And here you can see on the left, under our short day and long night, we have flowering. Alternatively, on the right, when we've got a long day and a short night, you see that the plant remains vegetative. There's no flowers on it. And again, that's why this is called an obligate short day response. It means that you have to have the short days in order for this plant to flower, and it simply will not flower when grown under non-inductive long days. Now, another type of response is going to be that facultative short day response. And when you, as the name would imply, facultative short day responses, we have a short day that's facilitating flowering. So again, under short days, we have flowering. Now you'll also notice that under long days, we have flowering as well. However, you'll notice that these plants are taller, or the stem is longer. And the reason I put that on there is because what we're looking at is beneath the flower, each of those leaves is going to be a node. And that's how we measure plant age, is by nodes for herbaceous plants. So what happens is, underneath long days, a facultative short day plant will flower. However, it's going to be induced to flower later than it would be when it would be grown under short days. That's why I have this plant with the extra nodes. And so you can grow a facultative short day plant under long days and it will still flower, but it's going to take longer, and you're going to have to maybe manage more of that vegetative growth. Alternatively, place it under short days and you'll get quicker flowering. So one question that I'd like to address now that we're talking about short day plants is, how do you provide short days inside of the greenhouse? Now, depending on the time of the year and the location, the natural photoperiod for you may be a short day. Now, for spring annual production, this is going to be during propagation and during the early parts of finishing. So right now would be a great example of short days. So if you're producing without any lights in your greenhouse right now, you likely have a short day photoperiod for your spring annuals. Now, if you're relying on these natural short days, be sure to check that you don't have any light pollution inside of your greenhouse. And when I use the term light pollution, I'm referring to light that may be coming inside of your greenhouse that you want to be dark. So this could be something like security lights inside of the greenhouse or inside of the hallway. It could also be very bright lights right outside of the greenhouse. In some instances, when greenhouses are located next to busy roads, it can even be the headlights from cars that are passing by during the night. So if you're relying on natural short days, go into your greenhouse during the night just to make sure that you have no light bleeding in there that might interrupt that long dark period that's required for flowering. Now, if you're trying to create short day conditions when the day length is long, such as later spring, summer, and early fall, our only option is to use blackout cloth or Blackcloth. So here we're looking at some cloth that is suspended in a greenhouse. And you'll see on the top we've got some shade cloth, and then underneath that you can see the black cloth that is bunched up there. Now what happens is, when the days are long, we can use black cloth and draw that over the crop to truncate the day. So at the end of the day, let's say at 5 or 6 p.m., this cloth may be pulled over your crop in order to block out the light and make that long night period when you normally have a naturally short night. There are a few best management practices when you're using Blackcloth to create a short days. Generally, we're using a synthetic black fabric. Additionally, one side of that black fabric, that side that's facing out towards the sun, is going to be aluminized. Now, what happens with that aluminized surface is that's going to reflect some of that light, and it's going to reduce the amount of radiant energy from the light that may get trapped underneath that black cloth. What can happen is when we're pulling that black cloth at 5 or 6 p.m., let's say we've got an early poinsettia crop, so we're pulling it in early September, it can still be fairly warm in the afternoon. So we need to make sure that we reflect some of that radiant energy from the light and try and minimize the heat buildup under that cloth so we can avoid that heat delay. So again, you're going to pull that cloth over your crop, it's going to black it out, and then you're going to retract it in the morning. And that's going to be pretty much the only way that you can create a short day in the greenhouse when the days are naturally long. So now that we've talked about short day plants, I'd like to talk about long day plants. And like you would surmise, flowering occurs in response to long days and short nights. Just like with short day plants, we've got obligate and facultative responses. So here we've got the obligate long day plant flowering under that long day and short night, and underneath the short day, it's not flowering at all. Again, it's obligated to be exposed to long days for flowering. Here we've got the facultative long day response. Again, the plants are flowering under both long day and short days, but you can see that flower initiation was delayed under those short days, as evident by the increased number of nodes that developed before the flower was formed on that apical meristem. So how do you provide long days in the greenhouse? Again, natural long days are going to occur during the spring production season, but it's going to occur during the later part of the spring production season. And so this can be a challenge for growers. In particular, I'm thinking of growers who might be in the Pacific Northwest that have climates favorable to growing annuals earlier than, say, here in the Midwest, but they're at still a very northerly latitude with short days. The earlier in the U.S. your season is, the less long days you're going to have in your greenhouse. Whereas opposed to the later your season is, the more long day exposure you'll have for your crops in your greenhouse. Now there are two primary ways to create long days in the greenhouse. The first is going to be the use of day extension lighting. This is where we use lights that operate before the sun rises or after the sun sets to extend that day length, as the name implies, day extension. The other way to create a long day condition is to use what's called night interruption lighting. And again, as the name implies, we're interrupting that dark period, most commonly between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. To chop that large uninterrupted dark period into two smaller dark periods, again, creating two short nights as opposed to a long night. This is also sometimes called mum lighting. So here is a diagram of the night interruption lighting strategy versus day extension. And again, that yellow color indicates the sun, the black color indicates the nighttime, and then that orange color indicates when we might use electrical lighting to modify our photo period. So again, we've got our night interruption occurring in the middle of the night, creating two short nights. And with our day extension lighting, we're adding light either at the end of the day or the beginning of the day to make a long day and thus a short night. So how are you going to create those long days in your greenhouse? Well, there are a couple of different options. This is probably the most ubiquitous, or has been the most ubiquitous form of photoperiodic lighting in a greenhouse. An incandescent bulb with a pie plate reflector. One of the reasons why this is so ubiquitous is, one, they're cheap, and two, they're relatively easy to install. So it's very accessible for all growers to try and put in some sort of night interruption lighting or day extension lighting, especially when we're using this technology. Another benefit of this type of lighting is that it's got a good balance of red and far red light. Now, in the next presentation, Roberto Lopez is going to go more into depth on why this red and far red light balance is important, especially for the flowering of ornamental crops. So I'd like to leave more time for him to talk about that, and I'll just briefly discuss that here. Now, one of the bad signs is that these light bulbs are energy inefficient. For any of you who have gone to unscrew an incandescent bulb after it's burned out, you may have noticed that that lamp is really hot, and that's going to be a sign of radiant energy. Now, that radiant energy is due to an inefficiency in converting energy into light. And so that's one of the downsides, is these can consume a lot of energy to provide the little light intensity that they do provide to our crops. Compact fluorescents are going to be an alternative that some growers will utilize. And here again, you can see them installed into that same fixture with the pie plate reflector. Compact fluorescents have the benefits of low energy consumption and a longer lifespan when compared to those incandescent bulbs. However, one of the problems is there is little to no far red light in these lamps. So what happened is when growers were looking to save energy and they installed these compact fluorescent lights, they installed them and noticed that they weren't getting the effectiveness that they had with their incandescent bulbs. And again, that's going to be related to that red to far red light ratio. So one of the ways that we can take advantage of the low energy consumption and longer lifespan of the compact fluorescents, as well as still get good flower initiation, is alternate compact fluorescents and incandescents in your greenhouse. So going down your string of lights by alternating CFL and incandescent bulbs, you can get some energy savings as well as reduce the rate at which you replace bulbs, but you can still get effective initiation of flowering or inhibition of flowering. One of the newer technologies is going to be the light-emitting diodes. And here we have an example of a flowering lamp. Now, these flowering lamps are designed to provide low-intensity lighting. This is not the type of LED that you would be suspending above a crop to try and increase or enhance photosynthesis. This is just to manage flowering. There are a number of advantages to using these LED lamps to manage flowering. One is they are very energy inefficient and they have a very long lifespan. And so while the upfront initial investment in LEDs may be expensive, the long life combined with the low energy consumption makes them a very economical alternative, especially over the long run. They also have a good blend of red and far red diodes to provide the right spectrum that's required for flowering. So you know that you're getting the right light quality to manage flowering as you require. You can also use high pressure sodium lamps. Now, if you already have HPS lamps in your greenhouse and you're using them to boost growth and photosynthesis, you can simply operate these during the dark period at the end or beginning of the day or during the middle of the night, and you can certainly get your long day response from your plants. However, there are also strategies where we can use HPS lamps solely for photoperiodic lighting. On the top, you see an HPS lamp with an oscillating or rotating reflector. What this does is this will shine light across crops, and the light beam will move across the crop, and that's going to allow you to light larger areas, but with fewer amounts of fixtures than, say, if you were using some of the screw-in incandescent bulbs or LED bulbs. Another way that we can take advantage of HPS lights for photoperiodic lighting is to mount them on a boom. And this is that bottom image, again, courtesy of Roberto Lopez. Thanks, Roberto. These HPS lamps mounted on the boom will move up and down the crop during the night. And again, that's going to provide enough light to interrupt that night. But again, it's only going to take a few fixtures as opposed to, say, an entire greenhouse full. Now, I've already mentioned this, but one thing that I'd like to do is distinguish between photoperiodic and supplemental lighting. Here we have a slide, and this was courtesy of Neil, and this was from his master's work. We've got a blue salvia, and on the top row, plants were grown under short days. On the bottom row, plants were grown under long days. Now then, if we look within the column, starting on the left, plants were grown under ambient light, and the long days were created with low-intensity photoperiodic lighting. Then you can see that 50, 100, or 150 micromoles of supplemental light was also provided to the plants. So one thing that you'll notice is that under short days, we have no flowering. All the plants remain vegetative. Alternatively, under the long days, we do have flowering. Those plants grown under the ambient light are just starting to form their flower buds. But you can see as the supplemental light intensity increases, the flowers become more well developed. And that reflects the fact that they initiated earlier. This can be called a facultative irradiance response, and that's where increasing light intensity can hasten the induction of flowering. So that's going to be one of the effects that increasing light intensity can have. Although again, under that ambient light where we're using night interruption, those plants will be flowering. Just to summarize this a little bit better, photoperiodic lighting only requires 2 micromoles or 10-foot candles to get a response. It may affect stem elongation a little bit, in particular because we require that far red light to promote flowering. Generally, photoperiodic lighting does not enhance the plant weight or dry mass or the quality of the plant by enhancing branching. It will, of course, increase the quality by promoting flowering or inhibiting flowering, but we're not getting many growth benefits aside from controlling flowering. Alternatively, supplemental lighting is light that is an intensity that has an appreciable effect on photosynthesis. So say starting 30, 40, or 50 micromoles of light. That type of light intensity is going to be enough that's going to enhance the plant mass, enhance that plant flowering. It also may hasten flowering due to that facultative irradiance response. It also may speed the rate of development depending on the type of lamp you're using. HPS lamps have some radiant energy in the light, and it can sometimes raise the temperature of the plant and increase the rate of development. And again, if you're using supplemental lights to increase the growth of your plants and increase the quality of your plants, if you're operating those supplemental lights outside of the regular photoperiod or the natural photoperiod, it also may have a photoperiodic effect by, again, extending that day length. So one question I get from growers is, what is a long day or what is a short day? And classic answer, it depends. It all depends on the critical day length. And that critical photoperiod or critical day length controls the transition to flowering. Now, the critical day length is at or below which induces flowering for short day plants. Alternatively, for long day plants, it's the photoperiod at or above which induces flowering for long day plants. And again, I've got some examples here. So here we're looking at a long day plant and we want to find the critical photoperiod. We've got a 10-hour day, 12-hour day, 14-hour day, and 16-hour day. You can see under 10 and 12 hours, the plants are vegetative. Alternatively, under 14 hours, and as the day gets longer into 16 hours, we have flowering. So for this long day plant, we'd have a critical photoperiod of 14 hours. Alternatively, for a short day plant, we've got those same day lengths, 10, 12, 14, and 16 hours. You can see that under 10 hours and 12 hours, we have flowering. However, as the day length gets longer to 14 hours, we do not have flowering. Growth is vegetative. So we could say the critical day length for this short day plant is going to be 12 hours. Here is an example from my master's research, and this just shows 3 different kalanchoe species. The flowers indicate that plants were flowering, and the leaves indicate that plants were vegetative. And we found that for this short day plant, photoperiods were 12 hours. The critical photoperiod was 12 hours for Kalanchoe mangini and Kalanchoe uniflora, whereas the critical photoperiod for Kalanchoe glaucescens was 13 hours. So plants will vary, even related plants will have varying requirements with respect to the critical photoperiod. Next, the question is, how long do you need to treat your crops for or expose them to inductive photoperiods? The length of time that plants must be exposed to flower is called the critical cycle number. And in a way, this is similar to the critical photoperiod. And that's the minimum number of cycles that you're going to have to expose your plants to get them to flower. Here's some example that I did as well previously with John Irwin at the University of Minnesota. And we've got cosmos. And cosmos are a short day plant. So we planted these cosmos into these 1801 cells, and we grew them under long days. Then we transferred them into short days for 6 days, 12 days, 18 days, or 24 days, and then transferred them back into long days. And then we also had the plants that were never exposed to short days. You can see here that it required a minimum of 18 short days to induce cosmos for flowering. When only exposed to 12 short days before being returned to long days, the plants were still vegetative and they never flowered. So some of the key points with managing photoperiod, ultimately you can produce a better crop. We can avoid inappropriate or premature flowering. we can also avoid delayed flowering and excessive growth. And we can produce plants that, again, are going to be more marketable. Now, when we're trying to create short days, we only have one option, and that's using Blackcloth. But when we are trying to create long days, we have multiple options with respect to how we're lighting, day extension or night interruption, as well as the type of lamp that we're going to select for our long day lighting. So with that, I would like to thank our sponsor, PL Lighting. Thank you so much for sponsoring this and letting us share this information. And with that, I would like to open it up to questions.